quietly, without fanfare. It became the turning point of Derek Bieri's entire life. For the first time since he was 3 years old, sitting in a frozen barn next to his father, Derek stepped away from a project and simply sat still. The adrenaline from the near accident took hours to fade. His arm throbbed. His hands shook. His son barely spoke. Jessica didn't leave his side. And for the rest of that night, the garage, the place that had built his childhood, his career, and his family's future, felt like a threat instead of a sanctuary. The next morning, Derek walked into the garage with a notebook. Not tools, not parts. A notebook. He listed every habit he needed to break. Unsafe lifts, rushing jobs, working past exhaustion, ignoring warning signs, brushing off fatigue because it's just one more bolt. He wrote it all down, and then he taped that list to the wall. For weeks, he didn't film anything, not because he didn't want to, but because he wanted to survive. When he finally returned to YouTube, something in him had changed. In the first minute of that comeback video, if you listened closely, you could hear it. His voice was calmer, softer, more intentional. The jokes were still there, but the tone was different. He wasn't just wrenching anymore. He was teaching, showing every step, reminding others not to repeat his mistakes. The grease, the grit, the grind, it was all still real. But now, there was wisdom behind it, too, and the audience noticed. Comments poured in. I've been lifting cars wrong for 10 years. Thanks for explaining this. Lost a friend in a shop accident. Respect for showing the safe way. Take your time, man. We're not going anywhere. It was the first time Derek realized he wasn't just entertaining people, he was protecting them. In 2024 and 2025, this shift became his new signature. Every build included a safety moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct. Viewers started calling it the Bieri method. Car forums made guides based on his advice. Even professional shops referenced his lift point videos. What nearly killed him became the thing that saved countless others. But while the audience saw the philosophy change, they still didn't know what came next. Because something else happened after that. Accident, something that forced Derek to rethink everything. Not just about his channel, but about his future. A phone call, a medical warning, discovery that would send shockwaves through his entire family and make him face a truth he'd avoided his whole life, a truth that started long before YouTube, long before Tennessee. Long before he ever picked up a camera, a truth that began in the freezing plains of North Dakota, and was about to change Derek Bieri's story forever. Quietly, it became the turning point of his entire life. 4 weeks after the accident, Derek couldn't lift a wrench without replaying the sound of that jack slipping. The echo of metal hitting concrete followed him everywhere. In the shower, in bed, even when the garage was silent. He'd spent decades fixing things, but now he was staring at the one thing he couldn't ignore anymore. He wasn't invincible. For the first time since he was a kid, rebuilding lawnmower engines in the North Dakota cold, Derek hesitated before crawling under a car. His confidence wasn't gone, but something inside him had shifted. This wasn't fear. It was awareness. That moment under the fury could have ended everything. His channel, his builds, his family. But instead of shutting down, Derek did something rare for a man raised in a world where you tough it out and never complain. He talked out one evening in early 2024. He sat on the back porch of their Tennessee home with Jessica. The sun was dropping behind the fields. The kids were inside finishing homework. And he told her the truth, that he'd been pushing too hard, too fast, trying to keep up with a pace that wasn't meant for one man. Too many late nights, too many projects, too little sleep. Jessica didn't lecture him. She didn't tell him to quit. She just said the words he needed to hear. We'd rather have you slow than lose you fast. It hit him harder than the car ever could. The new Derek, a different kind of buildr. In the weeks that followed, Derek redesigned everything about script. Garage. Not the style, not the grit. Not the honesty, but the process. He installed redundant jack stands, cameras, lifts, torque sensors, fire extinguishers within arm's reach of every project. He taught his kids shop safety the same way his father once taught him grit. And something unexpected happened. His videos got better, not because they were safer, but because they were more intentional. Instead of rushing through repairs at 3 a.m., he took time to explain every bolt, every mistake, every failure. Fans noticed. Comments exploded. This feels like the old days but wiser, one viewer wrote. And slowly, the accident stopped being a trauma. It became a turning point. The 2025 return, the biggest build of his life by Derek wasn't just healed physically. He was hungry again. He announced the most ambitious project he had ever attempted, complete restoration of a 1968 Plymouth Fury, the same car that nearly killed him. But this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Bentley helped with wiring. Bradley handled tool cleanup. Bailey worked the camera angles. Jessica took master inventory of every nut, bolt, and bracket. For the first time ever, it wasn't just Derek's build, it was a family build. The video series became a phenomenon. Millions watched, Not because the car was special, but because the story behind it was. Every episode felt like a recovery, a reclaiming, a rebuilding, not just of a Fury, but of a man. People didn't come for horsepower. They came for heart, the unotable oka during the build. Something surprising surfaced. Jessica found Derek's old military green notebook, the one he carried during his deployments. Inside were pages of wiring diagrams, engine notes, and handwritten reminders like, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Check everything twice. Live for the people waiting at home. On the last page, written after the Fury accident, was something new. I fix cars. They fix me, but my family keeps me alive. No video ever showed that page. No documentary ever mentioned it, but that notebook became the blueprint for every build that followed. 2025, the year he found BAL and SIE, what fans began to see was a different kind of Derek. Still stubborn, still gritty, still the send-it guy. But now, with a quiet wisdom earned the hard way, he slowed uploads not because he was tired, but because he finally understood what mattered more: being present, being alive, being dad, and in doing so, he created the strongest version of Viscript Garage yet. The cars were still junkyard rescues, the jokes were still unfiltered, the builds were still chaotic, but the man behind the camera was no longer running from burnout, he was running toward life. The truth that began in North Dakota had always followed Derek, even when he pretended it didn't exist. It lived in the quiet spaces of his memory, in the sound of wind slamming against rusted barn doors, in the smell of diesel soaked into old coats, in the echo of his father's voice, calm, stern, unshakable. And it resurfaced the moment Derek answered that phone call. It came from the doctor he hadn't planned on seeing. He'd only gone in because Jessica insisted. The pain in his arm, the numbness in his fingers, the headaches, he chalked all of it up to exhaustion. Too many cars, too many late nights, too many years of pretending he was invincible. The doctor's voice was steady, professional, but the words hit like a wrench dropped on concrete. Derek, we found something. He didn't hear anything after that, just a ringing in his ears, like the silence right after a compressor shuts off. He felt cold, not the cold of fear, something deeper, a familiar cold, the same kind he felt as a kid walking through a snowstorm at dawn, knowing his father was sick but refusing to admit it. It was hereditary. It had been passed down the same way. The love of machines had been passed down. And now, it was Derek's turn to face it. For days he didn't tell Jessica, not because he wanted to hide it but because he didn't want to see the look in her eyes. The look she had when he shattered his arm years ago. The look she had when he nearly got crushed under a Silverado. Worry, fear, a kind of gentle frustration that came from loving someone who lived life like he was. Fire-proof. But the truth has a way of catching up. She found the papers in the truck, and when she asked him, he didn't lie. They talked long into the night. No yelling, no anger, just two people trying to navigate the kind of conversation couples spend years hoping they never have. How do you balance risk with passion? How do you hold on to the thing that built your life without letting it destroy you? For the first time, Derek admitted what he'd never said out loud. I don't know how to stop. This is all I know. Jessica wrapped her arms around him, pulled him in close, and whispered the words that would shape everything that came next. Then we do it differently. The next morning, Derek walked out to the garage and just stared at the tools, the lights, the cars, the place where he'd built an entire career, the place that was supposed to make him feel alive, but now made him feel fragile. He wasn't done, but he couldn't keep doing things the same way. The shift started small little changes no one else would have noticed. He organized the shop for the first time in months. He labeled shelves. He threw away tools that were cracked, dull, or dangerous. He installed better lighting, added new safety stands, ordered gear he used to think only amateurs needed. But the biggest change was internal. Every project he touched slower. Every part he installed, he double-checked. Every video he filmed, he explained not just the how, but the why. And then he did something he had never done in his entire YouTube career. He opened up fully, honestly. In a video titled, I Need to Tell You Something, Derek spoke directly to the camera. No edits, no background music, no dramatic angles. Just him sitting on a shop stool, a man who had finally realized that strength wasn't in pretending nothing could hurt you. Strength was in admitting that something could done, choosing to keep going anyway. He told viewers about the doctor's call. Not every detail, but enough. Enough for them to understand why he was changing, why he was slowing down, why he wasn't chasing uploads like he used to, why he looked tired sometimes, distracted other times. And the reaction was overwhelming. Comments poured in from people who had gone through the same thing. Mechanics with chronic pain, DIY guys with nerve issues, fathers dealing with hereditary conditions they were terrified to pass down. People who had watched Derek for entertainment suddenly saw him as something far more human. The internet can be cold, brutal, unforgiving, but this time, this time, the internet reached back. Something shifted. In the tone of his channel, in the way viewers talked to him, in the way they saw him, he wasn't just the car guy with the funny edits. He had become something else, a mentor, a survivor, a man fighting for the life he built while still trying to protect the people who depended on him. But even as the support poured in, Derek knew a deeper chapter still waited for him, one he had avoided since childhood. The question he always carried in his chest, was this really the life he chose? Or the life he inherited? His father had lived in the same world, burning himself out on machines, ignoring the pain, working through sickness, acting like he could outrun the clock. And Derek remembered the night he found him in the barn, hunched over an engine block, too weak to stand but too stubborn to admit it. The memory haunted him not because of the sadness, but because he saw so much of that same stubbornness in his own reflection. If he kept going the same way, where would he end up? The truth was simple. He didn't want his kids to remember him the way he remembered his father. He wanted them to see him grow old. He wanted them to see more than cars and tools. He wanted to be there, not just physically, but fully, and that's when the final decision took shape. For the first time ever, Derek planned a break. A real one. Not a few days off or a short break in uploads. A full step back, to breathe, think, evaluate his health, and rebuild his life with intention. But before he stepped away, something unexpected, almost unbelievable happened. A letter arrived, handwritten, no return address, just one sentence on the front. Before you make your decision, you need to know the truth about your father. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper and an old photograph of a man working on a car, not his father, but someone who looked almost identical. Same eyes, same jawline, same posture. The letter wasn't long, but what it said would shatter everything Derek believed about his childhood, his family, and even the condition he thought he inherited. Because the man in the photograph wasn't a stranger, he was the person who changed the Bieri family forever. And the truth inside that letter was darker than anything Derek had ever been told. At first, Derek thought the photo had been sent to the wrong person. The man in it looked too much like his father for coincidence, but he wasn't dressed like anyone from the Bieri family. No dusty flannel, no farm jacket, no grease-stained cap, instead clean coveralls with a faded company logo on the chest. A logo Derek recognized instantly. Northland Motors, the same shop his father refused to talk about for 30 years. Derek unfolded the note with hands that suddenly felt cold. The handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. Your father didn't leave that shop by choice. What happened to him there? Is the reason you're sick? That was all the letter said. No name, no explanation. Just a warning sharp enough to cut through every memory Derek had stored away. He sat there for a long time, staring at the words, at the photo, at the man who could have been his father's twin. He felt something twisting inside him, not fear, not confusion, but something deeper. A sense of betrayal he had buried for decades because he remembered the stories, or rather, the lack of them. His father had always dismissed questions about Northland Motors. Always changed the subject. Always said, it doesn't matter, that place is behind me. But now Derek realized something chilling. His father hadn't buried the past because it didn't matter. He buried it because it mattered too much. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. His mind kept circling the same questions. Why would a stranger send this? What happened at Northland Motors? And what did it have to do with his health now? Jessica found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., elbows on the table. The letter spread out in front of him like evidence in a case he didn't know how to solve. She sat beside him quietly, waiting. Derek finally spoke. I think my dad lied to me. Jessica gently took the photo, studying it under the dim light. Or he was protecting you, she said softly. That possibility stung the most, because if his father had been protecting him, then what was so dangerous about the truth? The next morning, Derek called the only person who might know anything, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. His uncle, Ron. Ron answered on the fourth ring, sounding older, slower, but unmistakably familiar. Derek, everything all right? I need to ask you something, Derek said quietly. About Dad. About Northland Motors. There was silence, a long one. Then Ron exhaled like someone who'd been holding his breath for decades. I hoped this day wouldn't come, he muttered. But if you got that letter, you deserve the truth. Derek felt his pulse quicken. So it's real. Oh, it's real, Ron said, and it's uglier than you think. Ron told him everything. The story unfolded like a wound being painful and necessary. 30-2 years ago, Derek's father had been one of the top mechanics at Northland Motors, but the shop wasn't what it seemed. The owners cut corners, ignored safety protocols, and pressured workers to do the same. One winter night, a fuel tank leak went ignored. The ventilation system failed. The temperature dropped. And a chemical Derek had never heard of, one that caused long-term nerve damage, filled the air. 2 men collapsed. One died, the other survived. But barely. That survivor was Derek's father. The man in the photo, the one who looked just like him, was the coworker who died in the accident. Their resemblance wasn't a coincidence. Derek's father, and the man in the photo were brothers. Twins. A twin Derek never knew existed. Ron continued. The company covered it up, paid your dad to stay silent, signed contracts, non-disclosures, threats. 2. Northland Motors nearly killed him, Derek, and what it left in his body. Well, that's what you inherited. Derek felt like the ground shifted beneath him. A twin brother, a cover-up, a chemical that destroyed his father's health. And now, he didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken. Why didn't he tell me? Derek whispered. Because he didn't want you growing up afraid of your own future, Ron said. He wanted you free, but freedom built on lies is still a cage. After the call, Derek walked outside into the cold Tennessee air. It wasn't North Dakota cold, but it still stung enough to anchor him in the moment. He finally understood why his father had been the way he was, why he worked so hard, why he ignored pain, why he hid his fear behind toughness. And now, Derek was living the same story without even realizing it. But this was where the cycle could break. He wasn't his father. He wasn't trapped in that past. He had a choice, and that's when Derek made the decision that would change everything for his career, for his family, and for the millions of people who watched him. Wasn't going to hide anymore. He wasn't going to push himself into an early grave like his father. He wasn't going to repeat the silence that had nearly destroyed his family once already. He was going to tell the truth. All of it. On camera. Not for views. Not for sympathy. But because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needed to hear it. Because someone out there might be living the same story without knowing it. And because this time, the truth might save a life instead of ending one. Derek looked back toward the garage, the place that had built him, broken him, and brought him to this moment. He wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "It ends with me."